I'm that guy, and I love that I am known for this. I'm very proud of the Goosebumps stuff, but it's not, it's like, well, I guess that's who I am, but I'm not that guy behind the scenes.
I just think it's so crazy that we're 30 years later, and then there's people that are like my age, and they're all like geeking out about it. Like, it must be so interesting from your perspective that you've kind of seen the whole thing. There was the initial spark, and then of course with anything that goes up high, there's a down. But then there's this reemergence, and you go to a mall or whatever people shop now. I see Goosebumps shirts all over the wall. It must be just weird because it just follows you around everywhere. Hey, how's it going? You are here for Heavy Art Talk, and today I am very excited. I have Tim Jacobus joining me. For all those who are probably of a similar generation to me, Tim's work through illustrating nearly 100 book covers for Goosebumps certainly had a big impact on childhood, and it's safe to say that his art shaped me a ton and made me want to further my skill as well, and really inspired me as a kid. But beyond that, Tim's been in the illustration game for many decades at this point, has a ton of great experience. I'm very excited to pick his brain and of course learn something. So without further ado, I'm going to let Tim join me. How's it going?
How's it going, Lee?
It's going good.
Good.
One thing with this show, I talk a little bit about music, and I was reading in some past interviews that you're a bit of a prog rock fan, and I was just kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit on that.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I started out the association of art with music started early with me. So, I'm of an age where albums were the primary way you listen to music, and album covers were the gallery of the day. So the illustrators who were doing the coolest things were asked to do album covers. So I became a ardent fan of the band Yes. And to me, they had the greatest illustrator of all time doing their album covers, a guy named Roger Dean. There you go. Excellent book. Excellent
Came
book.
prepared.
Yeah. So, so he was I stumbled upon his art through the album covers, and then, started to take the deep dive. And again, at the time there's no internet, there's no anything. So you had to really look long and hard and go to bookstores. And he was the guy who just by looking at his art, and didn't read anything or hear him speak, who got me to think kind of out of the box with my art. Because up until then, my art was kind of straightforward, draw what you can see. Here's a picture of a tree. Here's some mountains. Here's a waterfall. And then getting exposed to his art and the way he would create all new worlds, that kind of opened my eyes and my mind to the idea of, paint what what other people can't see, and give them more of an experience. And you can still put the waterfall in the tree and everything else can still go in there, but try and expand on that theme. So, but the music itself, prog music is generally long form. So Yes was famous for having 3 songs on a full album. So meaning one song would be 20 minutes, the other one would be 12, and the other one would be 8. So
close to the edge.
Close to the edge. There you go. Yeah. So those kind of songs were great songs to paint and draw to, because they, not only did they, they kind of meandered a little, they also had crescendos, but it wasn't that 3-minute song that you got used to on, standard, on a standard rock station, which, kind of kept you in that quick loop. It was like running a sprint as compared to, running the half mile or the mile. So I found that that music while I worked really was a great soundtrack for what I was doing.
Absolutely. And you keep current with like Prague a little bit too, like Porcupine Tree, bands kind of like in that vein as well.
Yeah, Porcupine Tree, Stephen Wilson, who's the main guy behind that, got a chance to see them. They got back together one more time, and they were in New York, and got a chance to see them live again. That's about as up on it as I am. I try to stay current, but with the ability to dial into specifics on the internet, you could go down that rabbit hole long and hard. And so there's not any that I'm following specific. That would have been my last real, band that I actually knew a little bit about.
Yeah, totally. Well, I can give you a couple recommendations off
right,
there
cool.
too if you feel inclined.
I'll take that.
I'm a big Prague fan as well. In addition to metal music, I think in a lot of ways they're very related.
Especially now, there seems to be a real common thread to where the Prague now has a lot more edge to it than the Prague of the 70s. Prague of the 70s really did, back to my meandering thing. There was a little bit more of that. So yeah, I like it. I like that. I like that fusion.
For sure. Well, kind of talking a little bit about early art days and stuff. I read that like in high school, you were introduced to like the concept of commercial art, and that kind of like opened up your kind of like frame of perspective on it being a career. Could you kind of speak a little to that? Yeah.
So at my regular high school, we had art classes, and they taught you fine art. It's like, they introduce you to different mediums, and the art teacher, usually had a art background or an art history background. So it was great. Loved doing the classes, learned a lot of stuff. But again, it was always, here's pastels. This is basically how you use them. Go ahead and do a pastel assignment. Here's paper mache. Here's clay, here's sculpting. You got a little bit of a taste of everything. So when I got to be a senior in high school, the way my high school worked was you needed 100 credits to graduate, and you got X amount of points for each class that you took. When I got to be a senior, I already had 90 points. So I didn't really need a lot to finish out my requirements to graduate. And a lot of kids took the option of coming to school for a half a day and going out into the workforce. My father was having none of that. So he said, listen, I don't care what you take. I don't care. You don't have to take calculus, but to fill up your day, I'm not driving you back and forth, because at the time I was still playing sports. So, I'm not going to come home at lunch and then have to find my way back to school again for practice afterwards. Went to my guidance counselor and said, hey, I got to fill up the day. And, we're going through what was available at the school at the time, and none of it was very appealing. And he goes, I know you're interested in art. He goes, I just got this brochure from the trade school a couple of towns over, and they're offering a commercial art class now. And he goes, I don't know anything about it, but I know it's something that they've just added to the curriculum. And he goes, it would kind of work perfect for you, because you would come here in the morning to check into your homeroom, then get on the bus, run over to the next school, and you would stay there for a half a day. And it would fill up your day, and you got the proper amount of credits. And I was thrilled. I was like, all right, an art class that fills my day. I couldn't have asked for anything else. I had no idea what I was getting into. And when I got there, it wasn't anything like any other art class I had ever taken. They had all all the specialty cameras, stat cameras, and we had a little bit of it. We had a little dark room. We talked about getting art in production. At the time, there was still such a thing as typesetting, and what's the difference between black and white art and halftone art, and what the processes are to get, how do they make how do they actually print the newspaper? And there was a newspaper being printed basically across the street from the school, so we went over there to see how production was done. So the artsy part of art was kind of wiped away, and we were looking under the hood at I get it, this is where the rubber meets the road. So I got hooked hard, and then I realized, this is a thing. This is something I can actually dig my teeth into, and there's a whole arc of things I could go into, whether it was in the production end of thing, if it was printing, that could have been matter, could have been photography, but this is something that I've always liked, and here's an avenue for me to pursue and maybe make a career out of it. So, and the teacher was just the most unart guy you ever met in your life. His name was Frank Neubauer. He was a Korean War veteran. He had the flat top butch haircut still from the service. He smoked, and back then you used to be able to smoke in class, if you can believe it. I didn't smoke, but everybody smoked, and and he treated us very much like we were privates in his little army, and calling us knuckleheads, and he was one of those guys who had all the army flair, but he substituted all those curse words with stuff like "don't be a Mickey Mouse" and all so. Great guy, and he single-handedly turned my head around and pointed me in the right direction.
That's awesome. And was it kind of a hard sell to your parents then to pursue art school?
Yeah, at first. So my dad grew up. We grew up very middle class. Life was good. Me, my two sisters, we lived in a one of those pop-up neighborhoods that happened after World War II, and, lots of kids around, and, we never had to worry about, did we have enough to eat or any of that stuff. When my dad grew up, he dealt with all that stuff. He, didn't have enough clothes, had holes in his shoes, sometimes didn't eat. And, he got himself a good career, but he was held back because he didn't go to college. So it was the thing he talked about the most, that everybody, my kids are going to college. And before, in my junior year, I had actually picked the college I was going to go to in high school prior to going over to that vocational school. So he was happy I had said, I'm going to such and such a college. And then after spending, 3 months at the vocational school, I was like, I don't want to go there anymore. I want to go to art school. And I was getting nowhere with them. And so I was talking in my vocational school class, and Frank, the teacher, heard me saying, I go, yeah, my dad's not having any of this. He wants me to go to college. And he goes, give me your phone number. And he called my dad. They met at a local tavern. And my dad was in World War II. So the Korean War vet met with the World War II vet and discussed a number of things. And one of them, that art is a real career, and that Frank, thought I had talent, and that, my father should, at least, realize that this isn't some pie in the sky thing. This is a very down to earth and real career. And it clicked. So my dad, that night, I had no idea that they were doing this. I didn't know that this powwow was going down. And when my father said he met with my teacher, I went, oh no, what did I do wrong at school this time? And but he said, yeah, Frank, he seems to think that this is something that you should pursue. So I'll get behind it as well. So, like I said, it wasn't like my dad was a unreasonable man. He just had something in his head, and he still wasn't thrilled about it, because the art school I went to, it wasn't college. It was more like trade school. I got a certificate that says I spent X number of hours at the drawing board, but it wasn't, you didn't get an associate's or a bachelor's or any of that. So he was still, he was hesitant, but again, my parents were always very supportive. And you got to remember, I had two sisters. I was the knucklehead. I was the kid who was doing, all the wild stuff. And, they were very patient with me and my silly ideas. And so, they went along with it. And, to their credit, because now I'm on the other side of it. My son is here. He's 25, and the whole world is different when you're on the parent side than you are when you're on the kid side.
I can imagine. What about when you finished that program? The art industry, the portfolio reviews, and kind of the whole way you even submit your portfolio is so different than nowadays. Can you kind of speak a little bit of that 80s grind that you kind of experienced?
Yeah. So to get into art school, you had to present a portfolio. And again, now to your point, everything's digital and it's way easy to get anybody to see your art. And so, but back then you had to have either the original piece of art or a high quality reproduction of it, which was a pain in the neck to get back in the day, because nobody owned a good camera, or it was cost prohibitive to get something. The scanning was again unheard of, so everything was done with a permanently mounted camera. And so we all had to submit our art, even just to get into art school. And then when you leave art school, you think you've got a great portfolio. And again, by today's standards, what we were hitting the streets with was, we were one-legged men in a butt kicking contest. So, so I left art school again with, a very ignorant plan in place that I was going to skip all the nonsense. I wasn't going to go work for the newspaper, then work for a magazine, and then try to make my way into the book business. I was going to skip all those steps and just go right to the book thing, because I was so smart that I figured that out. And so I did skip all those steps. And so what that meant was, so I live 40 miles outside of New York City, and in downtown Manhattan, all the major publishers are all in a 10 block area. They're all right together. So it is reasonable to think that I could get from my house, take my art, bring it in, again, giant portfolio, because now I'm not carrying 8x10, pen and inks. I have full-size illustrations, 20x30 in a case, and you got multiples in there, and you're walking around the streets of Manhattan, and they would have drop-off days. And so when you get there, you have to figure out what that actually meant. So, Dell Books would have drop-offs on Mondays, and you would then drop your portfolio with a whole bunch of other portfolios all leaning against the door. And then you would have to just leave your art, which was frightening, because you took your whole life to make those pieces that were in there, and you just had to hope that they were good, because they weren't going to just let you in the door. So you left your art. And the way me and my ex-wife used to do it is we would drive in on Monday, pick a publisher, drop the artwork off, get back in the car, and go home and go to work. We had different jobs. And then Tuesday morning, you'd get up, you'd go to the publisher you just dropped them off at, pick it up there, and move it 2 blocks down the street to the publisher who was looking at them on Tuesday, get back in the car, go home and go to work, and then do the same routine. And, it was a big pain in the neck. And you didn't have a lot of contact with anybody. You would just drop it off, and it would be kind of in the same pile of stuff when you came back the next day. Sometimes there'd be a note in it. Sometimes there wouldn't. Usually they let you know at least. And what you used to do is, you'd put slip a piece of paper in that, somebody had to rummage through it to make the piece of paper fall to the bottom, or try to remember the order that the paintings were in to see if somebody looked at them. And that was the technique. It seems so primitive and unrealistic that's how things were done. But everything was done in person, handshakes. If they like your art, then you got invited in and you got a chance to sit down with an art director, and they could try to assess what kind of human being you were. And the hardest thing to do, obviously, just like anything else, is get your first one. And you got to get somebody who's willing to take a chance on you. And, luckily enough, I got a guy who was willing to take a chance. And once you get one, it's way easier to go down the street to the next publisher and go, hey, Don Walheim up at Daw Books gave me a job. See, here it is right here. He trusted me and I got the job done. So, everybody, like, if you ever did something, like say you were late on a deliverable at Simon and Schuster, it wouldn't take long for the word to get around that you were somebody who was going to drop your deadlines to, at the other publishers. Like, everybody knew everybody. Again, it seems so ludicrous that it could really be that small, but it was that small. The idea now that you can, as a new artist, you can show your work to anybody, anywhere in the world. And if you have if you can get the right connection to get it in front of that person, but, the ability to show your work instantly, or have somebody call you and same way and go, hey, I heard from so-and-so that, you're pretty good. Can you send me some stuff? While you're on that call, you can get some work to them, where back in the day, at best, it would be like, yeah, it'll be 2 days and I'll ship you something. Or, so, everybody's got, the double-edged sword of social media and the internet is evident to everybody. But for getting eyeballs on artwork, it's the greatest. There's no other thing ever for getting people to see stuff. I have paintings up in my attic of book covers that I did that I swear 11 people saw altogether. And they were printed on books and were in bookstores. And I can finish a piece now and put it up in 45 minutes. You can get a couple of thousand people to see it. It's crazy and wonderfully crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important too to have that perspective. I grew up in a different generation, so like I'm not thinking about those experiences. So it's important, I think, for people to hear that stuff. It's like, there are some things to be grateful for. Sure, it isn't perfect, but it's a pleasant reminder, I think. One quick thing. So when you were first starting out then, especially in that era, how important was versatility of style? Because it seems like it was so much of like being adaptable in that era, especially.
It was. Yeah, you had to you were a handyman. The equivalent of a handyman. Bring your tools. let's see what we're doing today. You might be plumbing, you might be doing electrician's work, you might be roofing. And, there were times where they would go, hey, we need, something that looks like it was, an oil painted, it looks like an oil painting. It doesn't have to be oil. It just has to be in that style. And we want it to kind of look like a Renaissance piece. Do you think you can do that? And when I was in art school, that was an assignment. It was like, I think I can give that a shot. And, or here's this thing that's cool right now. Do you think you can lean towards that and do? Yeah. And yes is always the answer. And, and it was years before. And it was the biggest complaint that I got as I moved along was, boy, you can do a little bit of everything, but I don't know how to put a label on you and present you to people as the, you're not the sci-fi guy and you're not the wildlife guy and you're not the, so at the beginning, it's a great tool to, pay the bills and keep the lights on in your house. But at some point you gotta, hopefully you find something or a style that starts to emerge in everything that you do, and it starts to show up and you go, oh yeah, that's I guess that right there, that's my thing. I like that. And things that you do brush stroke wise or color theory wise or just your overall approach and how you do your composition slowly starts to emerge as your own style. And I never thought, I was never one of those people who were, I was super happy I was getting jobs. So if I stayed the utility guy for my whole life, that would have been fine with me. But as time kept going on, I was like, oh, okay, this is starting to turn into something. And it really wasn't until Goosebumps came along and there was something that we were doing regularly. We were putting out one book a month in the same genre, for the same brand. And I was having to do it over and over again. And I was at the beginning going, okay, wow, I need a style here because we're going to keep repeating. And luckily it didn't take long for it to kind of settle in. And that's where my perceived style has really came out. Yeah,
through tons of repetition too.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. There's nothing else. It's funny. So that is what I am known for. But I wasn't a horror guy. I'm not a horror aficionado. I'll watch horror movies, but it's not my thing. And I didn't draw horror when I was a kid. All of it is something that was totally thrust upon me. So to be that, because, I'm that guy and I love that I am known for this. I'm very proud of the Goosebumps stuff, but it's not, it's like, well, I guess that's who I am, but I'm not that guy behind the scenes.
I just think it's so crazy that we're 30 years later and then there's people that are like my age and they're all like geeking out about it. It must be so interesting from your perspective that you've kind of seen the whole thing. There was the initial spark. And then of course, with anything that goes up high, there's a down, but then there's this reemergence and you go to a mall or whatever people shop now. I see Goosebumps shirts all over the wall. It must be just weird because it just follows you around everywhere.
So but you hit on it exactly right, where there's the initial thing where I'm just happy that we're doing something that we get to do more than, up until Goosebumps, probably the biggest series I was on had either 3 or 4 books in it. So the minute we got to book number 5, I'm already in uncharted waters. And I'm going, oh, this is really great. And then we get to do it for years and years and years. And it becomes something at the time. And to your point, you're always happy that every year they're going, oh, yeah, no, it's still going. It's like, wow. And it was over 10 years before it did finally shoot down enough to where they went, all right, we're going to put the brakes on this for a little bit. And at the time I went, okay, I got nothing, like, what a ride. That's all I thought was, what a ride. That's great. It's over. I need to kind of retool myself because now it's over and you don't want to be, I don't want to be a has-been. So what's next? Where can I go next? And I did a whole bunch of other things, but there were, this was more where during the 90s it was flashy. Now what I'm doing isn't as flashy, but I'm still in the business. It's still okay. And my son is little at the time, so the timing was really great. So I could do more of that dad stuff. I get to go coach the football team and get involved with things he's involved with. And then as he's big enough and doesn't want to hang around with me anymore, all of a sudden this retro thing starts to happen. And it totally caught me off guard. I knew Goosebumps never went away, but I didn't think there would be any any organized thing. I thought maybe it would be the oddity person who would, still have their books or, would pay somebody to, print a Goosebumps t-shirt. But the momentum has been, if anything, it's been increasing. And the part that's the best is here you are now. You are not, the first time I met you, if I met you, was at a bookstore and you were 10. And you were with your parents, and the kind of conversation we had when you were 10 was only a couple of sentences long, and you were embarrassed. And so now to go out to comic conventions, and you can come up to me as a grown-up, and we can have a real conversation about it. It's incredible, because at the time it was going on, I had no idea that we were making an impact on, and it would be something that you guys would still remember now. I thought it was just something, you got to sign the books at school. Okay, you had to do a book report. I had to do them too, but you just got the chance to do ones with monsters on the covers. And now to be able to have these conversations, it's very, very cool. And it's, it makes me also look back on it differently as well, to know, while you were just sitting there thinking, you just kind of grinded away at it. And I knew people were happy, but I didn't know, there was plenty of things you did when you were 11 that, aren't cool anymore. But the fact that you can still look at the art, still see that, it still has an appeal. It didn't get overly dated. It feels 90s, but in a good way. Yeah. And that's a thrill. That's an absolute thrill for me.
Well, I think the biggest thing is I'll give you a little plug. I got the book here. Good way of looking through everything is through Dynamite. But man, I think the thing that you've always had is the power of iconic images. And it even comes back to Roger Dean. I mean, think of Roger Dean just knows how to capture something that sticks with you. And I feel like all these covers, they're each unique. They all have that mesh style, but compositionally, they're just catchy, like a catchy song, I don't know. And I read too, when you were prepping a piece, and I do want to talk about the tight timelines as well, but you would do about 30 thumbnails and then narrow it down to 3 to present Scholastic. So I was curious, in that process of creating the thumbnails, did you see any patterns, your first 2 are your favorite or your last 2 are your favorite, or was it just a mix anytime?
No, so there's always an idea that you think is a great idea at the beginning, and it probably is a solid idea. And the hardest part about doing thumbnails is that's why you do so many, is the first couple are all just kind of minor variations off the same idea until you finally go, all right, you killed that one. What else can we do here? different view or different, so then you get onto the next idea and it starts to fall into place. And then usually while you're in the midst of that, like two of them arise out of there, or you go, oh, I can do a variation off the first one that's completely different, so that you have three different concepts. So no, there was no pattern like, oh, it's always, number 25 is always a winner. That sometimes, the first couple would work, but then there were plenty of times where, especially later on, where you would go, okay, oh, I got a good idea. And then you'd put it down and then you'd go, that looks just like
repeating.
Yeah, right. It looks like one you've already done. You just changed it from this creature to this creature. So, so you would start to work that way, where you go, all right, there's still something here, just don't make it look so much like that one and it'll be okay. Mix it up a little bit, change the composition, and there's still probably something there. The real beauty of it was exactly what the structure of the book series is no story. It wasn't a continuating story. If Goosebumps was a continuous story, it would be real hard to keep the ideas as fresh as we were able to. But the idea that it's a new kid, new town, and new monster every time you guys cracked the book, that was great. And it wasn't like I had to come up with stuff out of the ether. RL is the guy who's going, all right, this time we're doing this. And it's like, okay, now I got a seed. Let's dig the hole, stuff it in the ground, throw some water on it, and hope we can get something to pop out here.
That's crazy. And then when you were like in the midst of Goosebumps, like I read that you did it was like 40 hours from start to finish for a piece, or would that be just when you started the painting process?
That's probably all of it, more closer to 30 for just the painting piece. So the other one was concepts, pencils, give yourself another 10 hours for that stuff. So again, it's a very, very broad number. Some could go nice and quick if everything was clicking for you. And there were other times where you're doing home dentistry and you're really just grinding away trying to find that thing that really, really works.
The logistics then for that time period, so early 90s into late 90s, you'd come up with the sketches that you like. You would mail them to the publisher, then they would reply back over mail. Then you would start the color study and then the piece. Like, was there always that lag, and that's how it ended up being like a monthly book cycle? It's just crazy how tight everything is. It's almost like comic books. It reminds me of that. Yeah, speed.
That's a good analogy. If you know anything about the comic book world, it's wild. That's why, everybody goes, oh, that's so weird. There's one guy who pencils, and there's one guy who inks, and there's one guy who colors, and there's one guy who does lettering. It's like, yeah, or the shit wouldn't get done. We need the team so we can get this thing down the road. So the pencil sketches, when they were done, I would push through a fax machine. So my pencil sketches look pretty good. What they got on the other end was absolute garbage that popped out of there. And I spent more for my first fax machine, because all this stuff, a fax machine was state of the art. That was something real new in the 90s. And I paid more money for my first fax machine than I did for my first car. So, I had a real good one. And, you would fax the stuff over, they would see them, and then they would call me on the phone and say, yeah, we like, number 2. And so we sped up the process a little bit there. So there wasn't snail mail in that stage. But when the painting got finished, I had to package it up in cardboard. I was a meticulous shipper. So all my, I had boxes from the local appliance store that were all cut into flat pieces, stuffed in the basement so that I could put it together, and then go down the street and hand it over to the Federal Express people. And they would then run it in from my town here into Manhattan to have it delivered. They started to, they saw me on a regular basis at the the Federal Express place because I was always there just before they closed. And, and a lot of times I was there just as they were locking the door, and they're going, what, after a while they have to ask, like, what are you doing? Because I'm just coming in with a flat bunch, cardboard box that's 20 by 30. And when I told them what I was doing, they're like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Here's a little secret. If you come to the door, so they closed at 8. So if you get there at the door and the door is locked, drive around to the back because we don't close the garage doors until we leave. And you can hop in through the garage door and we'll still take it from you. So I only had to use that method once, but it was a very good piece to know, because if the door is locked and I can't get it to them, that means the next morning I got to get up and get in my car and drive it in. And I had to do that a couple of times during my career as well. So,
yeah.
But everything was, to your point, everything was physical. Everything was tangible. Everything was physical. It was all touch and feel. And, the original paintings were 20 by 30 acrylic paintings. They were one of a kind. So if the shit got lost, it was a big problem. If Federal Express never dropped the ball. But, it's one of those things where there were times where it left the publisher to go to the photographer across town or to the printer, and things would get lost for a little while, or they'd get lost in the building itself. Scholastic Books was a very huge place. So it was a whole different environment.
When was the last time you saw one of your originals then from the Goosebumps line?
So I only have, so that we did two. I consider this a Goosebumps cover. We did 2 books. One for R.L. Stine. It was his autobiography. It was called It Came from Ohio. And then I got to do one for myself. It Came from New Jersey. And I got to keep that piece of artwork. So that one actually is hanging at the top of the staircase. So that one I own. But I haven't seen any of the original Goosebumps paintings since the day, or I haven't touched them since the day they left in, anywhere from 1992 to 2000 and 2001. So no, haven't seen. Look, I would love to see them.
Yeah.
It's funny. I see them all the time, the reproductions of it, but I would really like to get a good close look at them again, because there are things I know I forgot on, like, oh yeah, I remember cutting the frisket there, or I remember that was a problem in that corner and I had to rework it. And, I can see it when I look at the art, but I would love to see them again.
Technically speaking, then, when you're doing everything traditionally and you're using airbrush and, just conventional brush, do you remember like roughly what that process would look like in most cases? Like, would you lay down a bunch of flats with like the airbrush, or would that be more finishing touches? Or did it really just vary by the piece? I was wondering if you had like a really kind of regimented process.
I had a kind of a structure. The first thing I did was airbrush down a base color on the board. This is something I've been talking about lately, and I realized that I kind of approached my paintings the way we approach artwork now digitally, in layers. And I would, a lot of guys back then would transfer their whole pencil drawing onto their final canvas, and then they would just paint around everything. So, the background would go around the main figure, and I didn't work that way. I would paint the background if it was mountains, and that would cover the whole painting, and I would paint all the mountains. Then I would transfer down. If there was a row of trees that came next, I would transfer them down and then paint the trees. And then my main character or monster would be the last thing I transferred down, and I would paint it then. That avoided, there was lots of times I would look at people's artwork and you could see seams, where they were painting around stuff. And I wanted that smooth, polished look. But the background always got sprayed down first. I didn't like the white of the board. And so that was airbrushed down. And then it was always a back and forth. I would always be blocking in with brush and then the airbrush would be to kind of smooth it out or polish it out. And it was a real back and forth at all times. So it wasn't like this part was always done airbrush and this was always done with brush. It was always a complete back and forth thing.
Yeah. Do you recall when you switched to digital then? And
it was early 2000s. We got a mandate from all the publishers got together and they said, okay, you got 48 months to figure out digital. We're not accepting any more traditional art.
Wow.
Yeah, because, they saw that there was such a cost savings to going digital, in the process. Or, it was taking a giant step out where, I'm giving you a piece of artwork. Now you got to go find a really great photographer to get a really great photograph of that to make your color separations from. Scanners were not really, there wasn't a lot of scanning being done. It was still being done photographically. And once digital came along, then it was like, wow, all that work's already done. Plus, there's not all these paintings that are stacked up in the room. You got digital files. They all fit on the computer. You can pass them anywhere you want to go. There's no lag in time of, oh, okay, yes, send me back that painting by Federal Express. I'll fix that one thing you want me to fix. Then I'll put it back in the cardboard and I'll ship it back. You're looking at 2 days at a minimum, probably 3 days. So the idea that you call me, I fix the art, and it comes right back to you in 30 seconds. I get why they wanted to do it. My first computer had an 11 meg hard drive on it. So you're not doing a lot with, no juice, but that was as good of a computer as I could afford or you could buy. And so the computers were crappy. I didn't have any technical skills. That's not what I went to school for. I went to school to paint. And so I was it wasn't a smooth transition. I went kicking and screaming into the future. And, but at first, it's terrible. Everything you do is terrible. Then eventually you start to get the small victories. Then the final thing that I was trying to get to was be able to create something that looked like what I was doing traditionally, just have the same feel. And once I got there, then I could relax a little bit. And then you start to discover, oh, this new tool does a whole bunch of stuff that I couldn't even dream of with my, my toothbrush and my sponge and, all my little tricks that I used to pull in, in painting. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is cool. I can do a whole lot of things here. And then, then it becomes, and you get comfortable with it. And then you go, okay, now, so at that point I had probably already been painting for 15 plus years, maybe a little bit more. So now I got something new. And, yes, I like the way stuff worked out traditionally, but now there's it's like, wow, this is a whole new thing. It's a whole new ball game. So it kind of sparked my interest in it again. And now I've got this cool new tool that, keeps me excited and gets me going. And my art now is kind of a combination. It starts outside the computer. All my pencils are still done right here on the desk in front of me with a number 2 pencil and, tracing paper. And I get my sketches real tight. And then it's not until I'm happy with what it looks like on the desk do I scan it in. And mostly it's there I still will continue to correct, what I think is wrong with the drawing. But it's by the time I get it into the computer, it's really only there to go get colored. So so it still has a traditional maybe feel to it. I hope it does. And then the color work is just, gets done there. And now it's a nice digital file that I can push around and get to everybody and send it to the printer, and they know exactly what to do with it.
Yeah, it seems like that's becoming more and more a common approach, is like blending traditional and digital similar to what you're talking about. Some of my friends do similar stuff.
Yeah, I've been seeing some people that are going in and out multiple times, and that's real fun. It's like they'll start outside, then they scan it in, they do some stuff, then they print it on a really good printer, and then start painting again on top of that print, then scan that print back in again and do some other stuff. That's fun, but for a practical, commercial way of doing things, it's too much of a high wire act. Too much can go wrong with that. That in and out, and then all of a sudden, oh, I got crap here.
For sure. In terms of like how Jacobus Studios like operates now, I heard you get up around 4 a.m. every day and you're putting in a lot of hours early in the day. Like, I guess, what does it kind of look like, and what kind of projects are you taking on nowadays?
So I do get up at 4 a.m. every day. First thing I do after a cup of coffee is my son is I'm an early bird. My son's a night owl. He checks the orders just before he goes to bed. We sell prints online, so he goes and pulls all the prints that are going out that day, gives me the list, and then when I get up after the cup of coffee, I sign all the prints, package them up, and that's my first. And then email everybody saying, hey, your poster's on its way. So, and then I'll check email and see what's going on. And then at that point, I've gotten away from it for a little while, but I usually will do a short in-home workout, body weight stuff, sit-ups, push-ups, pouring stuff, but just something, because I'm going to go sit down here at the desk, and what you've seen me do on this phone call is all the activity that I do for the next 10 hours. So it's good to get a little something early on. And then I'll sit down and I'll start. There's no one particular thing I'll pick up at that time. But what's great is it's still early enough in the morning where no emails are starting to come in yet. Nobody else is at their desk, so there's no distractions, and it's a great time to do something that's a little more creative. That you don't want to start and stop. I'm also art director at a small company called Dscape. We do interactive training. It's Storyline is the name of the program that we use. It's not Disney animation, but it's not a straight PowerPoint presentation. So it's somewhere in between there. You can do cool things. You can get a decent amount of movement, and depending on what the client has paid for, we'll give you more. If you're paying for more, we'll subtract out. And I have people who, I'm mostly the designer, but if the timing is right, I'll build the program myself. So I started doing that a number of years ago. It started out as a short stint, and then I've been with these guys for so long that it's like, all right, we could make this work together. And but then that work stops at 4:00 in the afternoon, and then my evenings are then back to illustrating. There's always at least one illustration on the desk at all times, and I'll work for the next, until probably between 7 and 8 o'clock, and finish my day with that stuff. So yeah, it's a combination of both. The illustrations, what's fun, funny, whatever you want to call it. I get emails. I don't have to look for work. I turn down more work than I can do. And all my emails start the same way. It says, hi, I read Goosebumps when I was a kid. I'm now fill in the blank. I'm an art director. I'm in a band. I work for a ski company, and I'm looking to have you do some artwork for me in the Goosebumps style. So all my old fans are now my new clients, and it's very cool.
Oh, that's awesome. just for the sake of time too, I'm going to pull up some like visual examples and any like stories that go along with the creation of these Goosebumps covers. And some of it too, I actually want to start, this is some of your work in like the 80s, right? Like
Yes.
before Goosebumps.
Well, the one on the one with the bird, that's a very early piece. That is so Roger Dean influenced. It's not even funny.
It's awesome though.
I was as leaning in as hard as I could to do something that was very Roger Dean-esque. That was just a piece I did for my portfolio. That wasn't an assignment. But yeah, that was I actually painted that as a gift, and it hung in my house, and I kept taking it down and working on it multiple times, so I had to actually buy a better frame that had glass on it so that I wouldn't keep taking it off the wall and touching it up. So that is the final version. It was a little bit more simple earlier on. The one on the right was done in probably 2005, maybe. Again, don't hold me to dates, but it was at least 20 years later. And when I was in art school, that's when Stephen King was, coming into his own, and he was the biggest thing that there ever was. And so we used to all lie to each other at art school and say, we were going to either be Frank Frazetta or we were going to do art on a Stephen King cover. Those were the two things. And I got lucky that they decided to repackage Carrie, Salem's Lot, and The Shining together in one giant hardback, and they asked me to do the cover, and that was awesome because it kind of brought the full loop around. I did actually get to do that Stephen King cover I swore I was going to do, and because I knew I was only going to get the chance to do one Stephen King cover, if you look real close, I posed for that picture, and that dude inside that jacket is me, and it looks just like me. So not only did I draw the cover, I put myself on the cover.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. And I just want to show some of the sketches that you did for this Dead House, right? Yeah. This is the first book you did, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So and there was a third one, and I think the sketch got lost. But yeah, that was the idea. You could see, I had the idea of the Dead House, try to change the perspective on the house. Same idea should have been happening in each one of the sketches. There's the menacing character in the window. I knew it was going to be nighttime. We talked about having some eerie lighting or a single light on. And when I turned it in, they picked the one on the left. And if you go to that next slide that you have, then on the left-hand side, I would do a color comp. And I did a color comp for every Goosebumps cover. Actually, what I would do is take the original sketch, and I would make it about 6 inches by 6 inches. I would glue it to an illustration board, and I would just take out my acrylics, and I would do a quick color study. Try not to spend more than an hour on it, but I wanted to do all my color experimentation on this little tiny painting to avoid working on the big one and having to redo anything color-wise. I wanted to make sure I knew what colors I was using before I even started that final piece. So the color comps for me were so valuable, especially because I just started painting them this way when I started the Goosebumps, and then they were going, I don't know if you know it or not, but part of the reason you got this gig is we loved your vibrant colors and your use of color. So once I realized, okay, that's part of the formula, then I started to really lean into it, and I tried really hard not to repeat any of the same color combinations through them, or, at least if we were using the same colors, make one more dominant in one of the pieces and some less dominant. And the guys who were designing the books, I don't know if they were guys, I'm just saying guys, the people who were designing the books at the time were then making sure that each book, the colors were taken from the art and helped build the frame. So the drippy part of Goosebumps and the Goosebumps logo all were color coordinated to the art, and every book had a different color theme on it as well. So each Goosebumps book was a standalone color theory extravaganza.
Yeah. And I have an example a little bit later too of what exactly you're talking about. And the other thing too is like, even with this first piece, you kind of establish a recurring thing of like warped or like worm's eye perspective and stuff. Like, was that something that you gravitated before Goosebumps, or Goosebumps kind of shoehorned you into like leaning into that as part of the style?
I had done a bunch of covers for a series that in-house, I don't know what it was really called, but in-house we called it this Women in Jeopardy series. And it was always about, it was always the heroine of the story was always like a mom who was out and she witnesses a crime and she tells the police, but nobody believes her. And then she goes on to solve the crime by herself. And, it's again, the Women in Jeopardy, but she figures it all out. And we had a theme to all those covers. It was always either worm's eye view, looking up like this one here, or, the bird's eye view looking down. Always try to make the perspective as dominant as you could. It would always be a building, and there would always be a single light on in the building. And then somewhere in the foreground was a thing, a clue, just something, a woman's shoe, a cigarette butt, a kid's doll. And we did a whole bunch of those, and they were fun. And we did every kind of building you could think of before, it got ridiculous. And when Goosebumps came along and Welcome to Dead House was the first one, they were going, we like what you're doing. We think you might be good for the series, but this first book, Welcome to Dead House, that stuff that you were doing for the Women in Jeopardy would work perfect here. Will you give us a version of that for this? So yes, to your question, I had done this a bunch of times, and luckily every story wasn't about a house in the Goosebumps series. Otherwise you might have seen this technique a few more times. But yeah, it was something that I had done and got used to doing that. At first the perspective was just very pushed, like in this one where, really getting the feeling that you're very tiny and the lines are all arced off. And then later on in the Goosebumps series, not only did we push the perspective, then we warped the perspective. And that became a thing unto itself. That was real fun. I did it just for me, just to keep them interesting. But then that kind of turned into a trope in the Goosebumps style.
Absolutely. Just a couple more sketches of another one, and it's kind of funny. The one on the left is the one that was ended up being selected, but you can kind of see that the staircase on the right here does look a bit like this. So do you think they were trying to avoid that? And they're like, yeah, let's go with the one on the left here.
Sure. Yeah, could have very well been. And I think I was too, where I was looking at it going, okay, that looks like that. But always, like you said, there was a kind of a style or a theme. And anytime, so number one thing that he used to tell us at art school was never put anything in the middle of your painting. Like that was the most boring thing you could do compositionally. You had the 4 quadrants inside where are the best place to put your stuff. And with the Goosebumps, I broke that rule as often as I could break it. If I could put something right in the middle, I was putting something right in the middle. And I didn't want to fool around with anything. I wanted something to be so dominant in the painting that you couldn't avoid it. It was just right there. That's it. We got nowhere else to go. So that middle thing was, we were going to try it on every single cover. And if it looked like something else, then okay, let's give a variation so we can, keep the look a little bit different.
With the piece on the left here, was this like a reference that you took of your own house or like a neighbor's house, like, or you came up with it?
Yeah, no, I grew up in a house that had kind of a staircase that had the turn in it. I think everybody in in the Northeast had a house that had stairs that came down, and then there was a small platform, and then 3 or 4 more stairs down. So it wasn't taken directly, or it wasn't a photograph, but it was definitely something that I was ready to use. Yeah, and I like you see, we did a color comp for both, and I'm not quite sure. I can't remember why that I followed through on the color comp. What I think happened was I was trying to stay ahead of the game, and I picked the one I thought they were going to pick, and I went ahead and spent the hour on the color comp, and then they came back and said, no, we want the one with the angle in it. So that's why there's 2 color comps on that one.
God, like just the colors are so popping and unique and awesome. Like really like soaking it in with the final piece there, like just the way those oranges touch the blues. And I think too, when you're talking about your process of like always laying down like that first coat of color and not working around things, I mean, it allows for atmosphere and layers, and like you can just clearly see it. Like if you had done it like in that kind of piece by piece style, everything would have been a lot more disparate. It's all connected.
And the combination of having that airbrush in there as well, gives you the hard edges against the soft edges. In the final art on the right hand side, the cast shadows of the banisters it's on the wall up behind there. Just it adds something special in there because it's a real soft lighting, and then especially everything in this is an angular hard edge bunch of stuff going on. So you have very geometric stuff, and then you have the soft edges that I just spoke of, but then the monster blood is the part that breaks it all up, because that doesn't have an angle on it anywhere. It's all rounded and smooth. And
the blood's always green or purple or blue, right? Never red. Wasn't that a thing?
No red blood. We could bloody it up as much as we wanted, as long as it wasn't red.
Oh, that's awesome. So, provided that you haven't whipped out the airbrush in a while, like, do you miss it at all? I mean, the thing with airbrush is it has an awesome look, but I find not many people actually enjoy using it. What's your take on it?
Yeah, no, I used to teach I taught an airbrush class either prior to I think just prior to Goosebumps taking off. And I used to teach it, like a crash course, one day teach you to do airbrush. And the first thing I taught everybody how to do was take it apart, clean it, and before they ever used it once, and put it back together again. I said, you got to learn how to do this, because you're going to be doing this a lot. The thing clogs. Yeah, it's not a very user-friendly tool. I did an illustration. So I don't do traditional art that often, unless the person who wants it is the only purpose is for it to hang on the wall in their house. And it wasn't that long ago when I did a piece, and my airbrush that I had at the time was so old that I had to go buy a new one. And, I didn't try to experiment with, what's a better airbrush. I just bought the model that I always used back in the day, so there wouldn't be a learning curve to it. It would be like, yeah, I get it. I know. I used a Badger airbrush, the Badger 150, and that's the equivalent of a Chevy pickup. It's not high performance, but you load it up and it'll get you where you need to go, and it will always work. It may rumble, and it may not be real elegant, but it'll get you there. So I would like to have some more time to experiment, because I've watched some other people just recently in person, not real recent, but I've been watching, there's a lot of, this particular person was a special effects makeup person, and the stuff she was doing with the airbrush, and she was doing it all day long, and I didn't see her tearing that thing apart once, and she seemed to have something going. So I I don't know if it's just because the makeup is a little more friendly medium than acrylic paints, or if she was just using a better tool. I would like to fool around again and see if there's something I missed back in the day. But again, like I said, but unless somebody's paying for a final, just a piece they're hanging on the wall, I'm not breaking it out I'm not just breaking it out for fun.
Yeah, I feel you. Another one showing the progression here. Of course, the finals in the middle here, and it's a little bit cropped, but I think this one too, it's unique. You had the eyes in the original sketch, and then you're like, oh no, I need to make this red. These red kind of beady eyes. Like, do you remember?
I think they might have commented on it, saying that no, I feel like the story line was, that at some point in the story, it's just something glowing behind there. I like the eyes myself. If you look at these together, I think the eyes are creepier. But I think that was something that might have been, projected to me. That go with the glow, and and I like that piece. I like the real, again, that dominant graphic of, I got a circle carved in the stone behind it. And then it's almost, just a portrait view of the guy, straight on. Everything's middle. There's no place else for you to look. You have to go right into his eye sockets, and there's nowhere else to look.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
Yeah, but those are nice and warm. The eyes, that's the dominant warm color. Everything else is cool. The cool red, blues and purples, and and then that orange is just, it's got all your attention.
I think it's cool too to see your color comps, because with this one on the far right, those blue strokes are very on the forefront, but then you can see the subtlety of them dialed back a little bit in the final. Right. And it's not all just beige bandages. There's the highlighted blue, all those little touches that I think, when I was a kid, I didn't recognize, but as an adult, I dissect them, and it just looks really nice in the eyes.
Yeah, and I liked on all the pieces, that secondary light source that shows up where you get to do a little bit of an accent color. Like you said, on this one, it's that teal blue that's, on the edge of his face and down on the lower part of the bandages and on the side of his head. Secondary light really keeps your art from having that flat appearance. It really helps to make that 2D look a little more 3D.
Absolutely. Pick these out. One on the left, just awesome how you're able to capture that lighting, and the one on the left, that's later in the Goosebumps career, kind of mid to late, right?
Yes,
and
yep. That was 40 something. Yeah. So we're 2/3 of the way through the classic series.
So as you were working through the covers and stuff, I mean, from my perspective, it seemed like they got more and more ambitious. Did it feel that way for you?
Yeah, because I'm trying to do something different for myself, and try not to do, again, on the right there, Haunted Mask, again, it's that middle. I made something real dramatic. Then it's all right, you can't do that one again. So you're pulling, low hanging fruit, so the ladder's got to go a little higher for you to get a bite to eat. So the ones that I thought I still think are very cool, they're not as popular, are the pieces that I did for the 2000 series. I
love those.
I thought there was some stuff in there that was, again, like you say, a little bit more ambitious, a little bit cooler. They were the logical progression after the first 62. So there's a couple in there where I go, that's what that's what I was trying to do.
There's one series 2001 coming up I want you to talk about. Yeah, so for me, I was 9, 10 when Series 2000 came out. So I was seeing those on like the Target bookshelf. So I was buying those when they were first being published. Whereas the first like 40, 50, I was just getting those out of the library like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they would still have like reprinting and stuff. But the Series 2000, the first Goosebumps I bought with like my own like allowance money was Creature Teacher.
Nice.
And that thing, I loved that thing so much. And then the one with the alligator in the zoo.
Yeah.
I love that painting so much too. So the Series 2000 has that's very vivid in my mind and like attached, my first purchases as a kid, It's crazy.
But going back to the ones you have already up here, the thing that I like about the Curse of Camp Cold Lake, obviously, is the reflection in the water. If I drop the ball on the reflection and it doesn't look good, then that's going to be a terrible piece of art. So I spent as much time with that piece of art flipped over 180 degrees so that I could be looking vividly at the reflection part of it and work that as much as I did with it flipped the other way and making sure that the actual creature looked good.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. With your other pieces too, would you do that trick to like just make sure that it, you know how it is. You can look at it with fresh perspective.
Yeah, I would do two things. I would do that early on, usually at the sketch stage, because a lot of times you would do a drawing and you go, oh, that's good. And if you flipped it over, you would go, oh, you could see if it was like the weighting was wrong, like it's weighted too far to the left or too far to the right. The second thing that I did was bring a mirror in or have a mirror there and look at your art, as a reflection and see that, again, that inverted vision would, especially when you were working on a face, you could really spot when you went, oh, look, that one eye is bigger than the other, or the nose is off center, or something wouldn't be right. That when it was the other, when you were looking at what you were looking at for the last 4 hours, when you flipped it around, it was very obvious where the flaw was in it. So, those two techniques. And sometimes I didn't even have a mirror there because I worked in a room that had a window right behind me. And if it was nighttime out, all I had to do was turn around and just lean over and I could see the reflection in the window and go, all right, yeah, that's okay. We can keep going.
Very cool. In the process of getting for like human reference and stuff, like I read This Is Your Niece here, but like there were times there was like that Invisible Boy one. Did you like have to go through like a catalog that the publisher sent you to like find like a boy to be like a model or something for it? Like how did that work?
Let's Get Invisible, the headless ghost. So the way the publishing business worked, there was a regular line item for the books where you could go. Actually, you went to this specific photographer. You went there and looked for, you got books out. You're going, I'm looking for a kid who's like this. And you go through the book and you pick them. And then the kid would show up at the studio. And sometimes you could dress them up. And then you would take pictures and you would have incredible reference. But with the Goosebumps stuff, I didn't do that as much. And a lot of the other books that I did, they were very insistent that you did it, so that the kids in your books, your reference material was spot on and the lighting was beautiful. And, there's some paintings that I don't have posted that, it really did make a great difference. I got away from that after a while where it's wonderful. It looks cool, but it's the time factor. We really didn't have the luxury of hoping that this kid was there and, waiting for the pictures to get done and then they ship them to you. And then again, everything's snail mail to get your prints. So anytime I could just take a camera out myself, I had a Polaroid, where the picture used to spit out of the front. And, I use that most of the time. So like you said, that's my niece. and get her to stop by the house and take a quick picture. Family members were in a bunch of the Goosebumps. My ex-wife is in a couple of them. I'm in a couple. So
where the guy's eating the worms or insects. Yeah, I forget what's the name of that one.
Yeah, that's so it ends up being a bald guy, and he's got the turtle, and he's getting ready to eat the turtle.
Yeah, you pudged him up a bit.
I pudged him up, and I cut off all his hair. And at the time, I posed for it, and I used to have shoulder length, bad rock star hair. Yeah, and I thought that was so funny that I took off all my hair, and obviously I was predicting the future at the time. And but there was that one, and Camp Jelly Jam. I'm also that's me as the camp counselor. So again, the point being, it was faster and more efficient to take a quick shot, and then it also made me, Polaroid, the pictures I got from the photographer were just stellar. They were spectacular. So you were married to that reference material because it was so good. Where a lot of times, whatever I shot with the Polaroid was fair at best. So it made me do more art stuff to it. So, make it more dramatic, then, for lack of a better term, it would be a little bit more cartoonish or a little more exaggerated, which worked great for the Goosebumps stuff. So the lesser reference material made for a better painting in the long run.
These are two iconic ones. The Werewolf Fever Swamp, right? That's the name of the title. Yes. Yep. I had a puzzle of that when I was a kid, and first I was terrible at puzzles, so I just had my sister make it for me, but I just looked at the cover of the puzzle box all the time. Obsessed with this one, too. That was a nice
big version of it, too, where it wasn't just a tiny version from the book.
Oh, man. I'm trying not to lay it on too thick, but you have no idea how obsessed I was with Goosebumps. I had, did you ever see the Goosebumps, bed set for kids? So I had a pillowcase, I had sheets, I had everything, and it was just Goosebumps. It was just like this green slime. Oh my God. I wish I had that still, because it was pretty it was very 90s, very cool, but man, I was so obsessed. That actually just came to me.
You were styling then if you had the full bed set. Now,
I was in a race car bed too.
I think I've seen pictures of the bed set. But I saw later on they did some beach towels of some of the Goosebumps covers, and that was pretty cool to see. Big giant versions of the art.
Yeah. Any stories come to these ones, or just you were in the grind at the time?
With the Horrorland, I liked this pencil drawing at first. I was glad that they could see what I was seeing, because the idea that the Horrorland is not very big in this picture. It's back there, and you can see that doesn't look like a great place. But that the foreground really kind of sets the stage for it, but you can imagine what's going on in the background. So that one's more, you got to use your imagination a little bit more on that one.
Definitely.
And then Werewolf of Fever Swamp. It's funny. This is people request this one. I know the story is pretty good. The book story is good. So there's ones where I think the art is good and maybe the story wasn't popular. And then there's other ones where the story was real popular and I may not be thrilled about the cover, but those are, there's ones that just people really dig. And I don't dislike Werewolf of Fever Swamp, but I thought that the other sketches were a little more exciting. I had them where it was the kid was half turned into the werewolf. This one, it's just a wolf and his clothes are there. So to me, we missed the cool part, the transition part. And so I really like the color palette in this one. The lime green water and the purple sky that I thought worked real great. But it wasn't one of my favorites. But then once I started doing cons, had to hurry up and get this one on the table because it was heavily requested.
That's funny. And then the Goosebumps TV show that was also, out at the time. I thought the werewolf episode was one of the best. Right. That one and the haunted mask. The haunted mask, like that one was very good and very frightening because you just couldn't take it off.
Right.
God,
right.
That scared me so much as a kid.
Everybody could relate to that. You didn't even have to be a kid. I'm watching it as a 30-year-old going, I don't like that either.
Yeah. Okay, here's what we were talking about. So this is Series 2000, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So this was we got, again, like you say, we were getting a little bit more ambitious. So on this one, what we decided we were going to do is do one giant painting, but we're going to cut it, we're going to cut it in half. And, the one on the left goes on the first book and the one on the right goes on the second book. And then you buy them both, you read both stories and you can visually put them both together. And that was great. So a typical Goosebumps illustration was 20 by 20. And when we got to the 2000 series, we went to 20 by 30. So then this particular piece was now 40 by 30. And so now we're getting, these are very big paintings. And so I finished up this piece of art. Obviously, it took a little bit longer because it's twice as much real estate and there's a lot going on in this piece. And there's a ton going in. I mean, there's people running down the street in the background. It really was a tour de force. Yeah. Then I ship it, and then I get a call the next morning saying, "Oh, we got your painting, and there was an accident, and during shipping, the painting got folded." And I was like, "Oh, crap." And they're going, we're not sure what you can do, and but we're going to ship it back to you. And, we started talking about, all right, maybe I have to do a whole nother one. And I was bumming because, again, this already took too long to start with. And when the piece came back and I opened it up, it did get folded, and it literally got folded in half, but it got literally folded in half, perfectly down the middle, top to bottom. And that's where we were going to cut it anyway for production value. So, I called them back and I'm going, we're good. Like, I don't have to do anything to this. Just make sure, there was a little deviation on the edge. There's probably a quarter inch to a half an inch that was a little fudged there, but just crop it and go. And got very, very lucky on that. But if I'm sure this piece is somewhere, but there'll be a giant seam right down the middle of it.
Do you think this was perhaps your most challenging piece then?
Yeah, just because there was so much going on. There's three kids on the right. There's a dog on the left. There's the two Martians you can see, but every one of those rocks has another one of the body squeezers coming in on the flaming asteroids. And then there's a half a dozen or 8 people running down the street. So yeah, this one, way more. It's that kind of stuff that I didn't like putting in to a Goosebumps because you're probably going to miss it. And I'm going to spend a lot of time, putting those people running down the street. But until you get way close, and it could be 3 weeks after you've already finished the book before you go, oh, look at that. Yeah, there's some people running down the street.
Yeah. And I think, you're obviously aware, but what makes it so challenging too is just like, oh, I got to get that person's sizing just right in perspective relation to other people. It's all about how things relate to one another that, I find really challenging. So is that kind of how it is?
And you're pushing too, where my perspective is, we're not being true all the time. I'm forcing the perspective a lot. And I had to, be careful with the kids because they're real, the kids in the thing, they're real, but everything else is made up, and you got to go, well, his foot would be a little bit bigger here than what we actually are seeing. So pull that, make it, but don't make his feet too big, because then he kind of looks dopey. And it's you gotta. There's a lot of back and forth. I think if I remember right, I had problems with the sizing on the kid. I might have had to repaint him at least once. The little kid who's behind the rock in the background there. I think I made him too big the first time, and I went, no, he's way too big. So same thing where, he's got to be smaller. Not that because he's the littler kid, but the younger kid, but he's way far back in this illustration.
And I had this, obviously Slappy is very iconic. And then with those gnomes, also very iconic. And then also just how, what you're talking about, they're color matched with the borders and everything.
Yeah. And they really got into it at the beginning. They were just fooling around. And then after a while, like you could tell that they were as into it as I was into it. And, and the other thing, and you can see, I think you can kind of see in here, and anybody who got the books remembered that they made sure that they embossed the Goosebumps logo. So the Goosebumps logo really did have Goosebumps on it, and it was tangible and you could feel it. And pretty early on, they stopped that because it was really expensive. I remember them talking about it, like a crazy amount of money to do embossing on the cover, and because of the number of runs they were doing. So it was cool. So first run or the first editions all had the legitimate Goosebumps logo on it.
It raises the collector value too for those first ones. I didn't realize they stopped doing it.
It was like a nutty thing, like $1 a book. When I heard the amount, I'm going, why'd you even start doing it? It sounds so crazy that you would dump that money just for. But there isn't a kid who doesn't, a kid from the 90s who doesn't remember it and remembers going, oh, look at that, you can touch it too.
I wanted to have some pieces that were non-Goosebumps as well. Was this a personal piece then?
Yeah. What this was, this is a better this is a better version of a Roger Dean influence piece. There's nothing specific in there other than maybe the pillar style rock formations, but everything else in here is more my style. And I was doing these philosophy books, and they just wanted weird pictures on there. And I would do lots of ideas because I never knew what would hit and what would miss. So these were 3 separate ideas. One was the sand morphing into the ocean waves. The other one was the road that went to nowhere and the planet Earth out there. And then the third one was the flying orcas. And they picked a different one altogether, and I painted that piece. But these 3 sketches were laying together on top of each other on my desk. And I went, oh, these all go together. This is a thing. So I over the course of my career, I have not done many pieces just for fun. It's very rare. I've been lucky enough to be busy enough doing pieces that somebody wants to use on a project. So obviously those will always come first. But this is also one of the pieces that it hangs in my bedroom. So it's also one of the pieces that doesn't have a monster on it. So it's a little easier to have that hanging over your bed than having something like the Horrorland monster reaching over your bed at night.
I can imagine. And getting down to the end here.
This is that warped perspective thing that I was talking about with the egg monsters from Mars. Once I started twisting the perspective, that gives a whole nother variable to making it's, the Goosebumps imagery get weird. If the perspective was just straight and normal in that kitchen, it wouldn't be as dramatic as having it, be a little bit like it's dreamlike or something. I don't know what the proper term is, but that then became a theme. And anytime I could put the warped perspective with a tile or checkerboard pattern, whether it's the floor or the ceiling, I'm going to start dropping that in there, and you'll see that checkerboard pattern a lot.
And Converse sneakers.
And Converse sneakers. Anytime you saw anybody's feet, they were all wearing Cons, and it's not BS. I still wear them. It's not a it's not a trope. It's not a fake. I wear them, and they go in as often as possible. Again, just something that was strictly to keep myself entertained, nobody else.
I like these. I mean, part of it, a lot of people on
That's
here.
cool. I never saw those side by side. That works good.
Oh, I was like, hey, it's a little heavy metal,
Yeah, nice mashup. Nice mashup. But the Night and Terror Tower, that one, the story behind it is I had to paint it in one sitting. So like we talked about earlier, I average of, 24 to 30 hours was what I needed to paint one. And because the deadlines that month were all very tight, I had to do that one in one sitting. So it's not that I can't, I'm sure you've run into it. If any creative person has run into it, where you get up against the wall and, okay, now you got to work all night on something. It's not the end of the world. You just can't make a habit out of it because there's diminishing returns on it. Anybody can stay up one night and it'll be fine. And then you go to bed and you'll catch back up and you'll be fine. But you try to do that night after night, and either your health is going to give out or the quality of your artwork is going to go down the toilet. So the one on the right is a newer piece. Band was called Savage, I think. And they spelled out a whole bunch of the stuff that they wanted. They wanted the demon on the motorcycle and a dragon flying through the air and a castle and like they had a laundry list of things that had to go in this piece. So I made sure that they all got there. I did like the thing I wanted to be different, and it ended up working out pretty good, was I wanted the motorcycle to be something just not very typical, because all the ones I was doing at the beginning just looked too much like a production bike. And once I figured out how to get away from that, then the rest fell into place.
I didn't realize that was for Savage. They were a new wave British heavy metal band from the 80s. They had their first album, I think, was called Loose and Lethal. So this was like later, like... Yeah,
I'd have to... I could get you more info on it, yeah.
But yeah, that's really cool. I just was like, hey, this is really badass image.
Yeah, again, it was fun to do. And like I said, the laundry list was long, and you can look through there and go, oh yeah, look at it. There's a little skeleton hand reaching out with a clock. I don't know what it means, but that had to be in there.
Yeah, that sounds pretty typical to a lot of the metal art commissions exactly. I hear about.
Yeah, I think every one of these items either was part of a lyric or something. It was, it wasn't just, random, but it, I'm not used to, 42 things that have to go in a piece.
Nice. All right. So because it was, I love this piece, the tower here, but if you were to do anything or do any touch-ups on it, what do you think you might do nowadays?
If I had more time, I think so. The whole behind it would all be just atmospheric stuff. I like him. He's what I wanted to have happen. He's this, he's the character I wanted. I would make sure that what's going on behind him doesn't look as claustrophobic. It doesn't really look like a hall. I would like to open it up more so that there was other, like the hint at another passageway to the left or to the right, or that the roof didn't come down so quickly. Just a little more feeling of depth. The castle to me there looks a little bit flat.
It's like, now that you mention it, I know exactly what you mean. Like,
Yeah.
I would, that sounds like the perfect solution. I never even thought about those things, but yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't take a lot, but it would just make you go, it would make you at first see him, and then it'd make you like look behind him and go, wow, I wonder what the hell's going on back there. Where right now, there's not enough there to make you go, what's going on behind him?
Yeah. And I think this is the last one here.
Yeah. This was the one I was telling you about. This was the one I broke the airbrush out again for. So it hangs at a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, he's getting ready to move. So this painting just got packaged up. But I painted that as one giant illustration, and then I have a friend who's a contractor, because I was real nervous. And I said, okay, now, he came over and he's like, wow, so it was, I don't know, it's 6 feet by 4 feet, whatever, however big it was. It's big. And then I was like, yeah. So, then I had a little pencil drawing. I was like, yeah, we got to cut it like this. And he's like, oh, I don't like this. I was like, listen, we'll measure it 55 times, because we had to not only measure it right, but we had to cut it from the back. So, everything's inverse. And we triple checked, and, it only takes 2 seconds to run the circular over it. But if it's wrong, it's wrong. And, but it all came out, it cut real nice. And this is a simulation. He's got a real nice thin black frame around all the pieces, and it came out really nice. And the wall that it hangs on is that same brown color, which was the brown that I worked into. There's one leaf in there that's brown, and you can see the fish is a little bit of the brown, and then the rest of it is straight black and white. That was something that I got into, did a couple of paintings, traditional paintings, just in black and white, because I'd spent so many years doing, the super rich Goosebumps stuff, that the getting away from color is a good exercise, because then your art has to be good. You can't trick anybody with the ta-da, here's the flashy colors. Oh, look at this. Yeah, it's a carnival. And then, this, you go, okay, it better be right. The branches better be right. The reflections better be right. So, I have another piece that hangs in my living room that was done in the same black and white style. And it's giant black and white paintings are very appealing, because there's color everywhere. There's no lack of color. You go in my living room, there's the couch and the rug and the wall. There's tons of color everywhere. But then there's this giant element that there is negative. There's no color, and it sucks you in just due to that fact. So I haven't quite got away from this black and white stuff. I'd like to do more of it.
Nice. Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And it also blends kind of the fine art with the illustration in a nice way that feels like authentic to you, not like a big departure. So
right.
I love it. All right. Well, just kind of wrapping up, I always end with question relating to kind of like advice you would give other artists or illustrators. I was thinking of that, but then also like, what's maybe like one misconception you think that the general public, so non-artistic or artsy people, have about this type of career, since you've been in it so long?
I think art people don't realize that as an illustrator, that they're always like, oh, where do you get these ideas from? Almost none of them are mine. Like I'm conveying someone else's concepts that they gave me, and I'm just taking the words that they gave me and turning them into a visual. So, they're, all the Goosebumps are RL's ideas. I just turned them into a visual. So, the idea that, listen, there are a lot of demons running around my head. That's not, that's not up for debate. But again, everybody thinks that, well, your imagination is everything. And that's a real part of the skill set of being an illustrator, is being able to listen to other people when they're describing their ideas and make sure that you're getting that concept to come through. Sometimes you surprise them and you make a little bit of a turn and it's not what they have in their head, but you've got to be able to, you got to be able to read minds a little bit.
Yeah. And would that be kind of part of your advice too, is like get good at, reading the client, understanding what they want out of the project? It's
a good piece of advice, is right from the start, know that you're being paid for this and this isn't your art. It's not yours. You're hired to create this. This is their art. So get away from, I think it'll be better. Nobody cares what you think. You want them to tell you, I think this will be better, and whether you agree or not, you just say, yeah, okay, let's do it that way. I've had a number of paintings where when I turn it in, and then there are changes made that I think the way I did it was the better way. Then there's been more than I can count, where I take something and turn it in and they go, hey, let's change this. And I take it home and change it and go, yeah, you were right. That's not a lateral movement. This is a real improvement. So know that the art you're working on isn't yours, and that make it, well, what's nice about digital art, well, for any art, is you can save the version you think is great. And if they make changes, you can always show the one that you think is the best. But again, make those changes and never go into it with the, this guy's an asshole, he's making me change this. This is, you're a chef, that they're going to add a new ingredient at the end, make it work. Don't just dump a whole bunch of salt in it and go, here's your art.
All right, cool. Well, Tim, this was so much fun. Thank you for kind of going down memory lane with us and sharing a lot of good insights too. Like, this is a real treat. But for anybody watching, please support Tim. He's on Instagram. He's going to conventions all the time. You can buy prints off his website. There is the Art of Goosebumps book that I showed. But really, there's plenty of ways to support. And then you also, like, for any prints that are being sold, part of the proceeds go to charity, right?
Yes. $10 from every print as of now goes to buying food for the food bank down the end of the street. And everybody's been super generous, and we've been able to fill up a pickup truck full of food every month. We just passed our 4-year mark this past Saturday, so 48 months of filling up the truck. We're helping a lot of people. So, it kind of started as something where I figured, if we took 2 bags of groceries over, I would have been happy. And the fact that we, through everybody else's generosity, we continue to do so is real nice.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you next week.